And welcome to our ongoing tarot on of 2020 during the global lockdown, the great pandemic of the coronavirus of 2020. I'm recording these live as we go along under the various lockdowns that are happening worldwide at the moment. At the time of live recording, this is Easter Sunday. I believe it's Easter Sunday, the 12th of April, and it's getting a bit more difficult to know which day is which. I saw a nice meme today that was 2020 is a very special leap year. February has 29 days in it, March has 200 days in it, and April has 5 years in it. And it certainly feels that way at the moment. So I hope those who are watching this live are keeping safe and sane under the various conditions that have been imposed on societies all around the world. It is a pandemic. The word pan means all, demos means people, so pandemic literally means all people. And I was reminded recently of a wonderful Shakespeare quote, which is, "One touch of nature makes the whole world kin." One touch of nature makes the whole world kin. And I'd like to believe that that's one of the good things that may well come out of this, is a slight nudge towards a more universal social mindedness. But who knows? So what I'm going to cover today is some ongoing things with our NLP and tarot. We're going to play a couple of games with tarot from my book Tarosophy, and I'm going to briefly talk about that. And I'm going to refer to a Kabbalah book, and then we're going to do our daily nighttime bedtime reading, which in this case continues to be from Invisible Cities by Italo Calvino, which I'm reading from. Yesterday we read a slightly longer section, the Lottery in Babylon by Borges, and next weekend I'll be reading a longer, slightly longer section as well. Maybe I think the longer sections are still only about 20 minutes at that. From one of my other favourite authors, Philip K. Dick, and I'll be talking a little bit about his work and how that informs both the Western esoteric initiatory system, but also to some extent my understanding of how tarot works and the importance of Kabbalah as well. So if we're ready, I'm going to introduce another aspect of NLP with my handy pandemic flip chart. We've already covered a lot of things which you can find if you go back through the previous videos. They're in the unit section of the Facebook group. And what I've started to introduce is Milton model and meta model. These are language patterns seen from two sides. And I also want to introduce today something that we'll be covering again in more detail and adding more to as we go along, which is meta programs. And again, like a lot of NLP, these all sound very linguistically fantabulous, but in fact, they're quite often very simple things that you can learn to listen to in everyday conversation, use in your own conversation, and for example, learn to hear politicians, celebrities, friends and family, people being interviewed. I'll by the end of this, you'll be learning to listen to people very, very differently. So I'll introduce the meta programs because that's something that is very useful in change work, and then I'll cover our Milton model, meta model language pattern of the day, and then we'll do some tarot games after that. So meta programs are basically, if you imagine that you took a sort of computer analogy to the human mind, and anyone watching the third series of Westworld or any of the series of the modern take on Westworld will be familiar with how they're tackling the whole concept of the human mind as a program. But metaprograms took that view quite a long time ago. And basically, metaprograms are sort of habits of thought, general patterns. It's a little bit like in astrology when you say that someone is a Virgo or a Taurus. And that gives you some indication of the way that they might behave or think. The same with metaprograms. And we elicit metaprograms by listening to people. We can ask certain questions to find out the way they think. And a lot of these metaprograms are binary. That is to say, people either think one way or the other. Very rarely in between, or they flip from one to the other. Quite often, as we saw with representational systems, like if people are generally auditory, generally visual, general kinesthetic, quite often when they change their state, whether that's through anxiety or into deep relaxation, their state changes, their representation system changes as well. And it's the same with metaprograms. I've found over the years that sometimes people will swap their metaprogram if they change their state or under certain circumstances. So the first one that we're going to refer to is away from and towards. Away from and towards. Okay, that's one example of what's called a metaprogram. And basically, if I ask you a question, and I've not seen any comments in the comments box, so I'm hoping that this is actually going live. But away from and towards is basically can be answered if you think for yourself about when you have to tidy a room up. Okay, when you have to tidy a room up, do you when you think about it, because most metaprograms are semi-unconscious, they just exist underneath our conscious mind. But when you break it down and think about it in this way, when you come to tidy a room, and eventually you come to tidy a room that you've been maybe putting off for a while, do you do it because you can visualize exactly how it will look and how you will feel when it's tidy? So you can almost imagine going through the work of tidying this room up, how it's going to look when it's all clean and fresh and sorted out. Or do you do it when you get to the point of you can't stand how it's become? That is to say, the mess is really now gone over a threshold and you just can't stand it. So you have to do something about it, and that doing something about it is tidying up the room. So that approach, the answer to that question, basically gives you whether you are an away from or a towards person. That is to say, are you motivated to move away from a non-desired situation, or do you find more motivation in working towards some desired situation? Now, different people work in different ways, and now you know this, you'll be hopefully interested in finding out whether your partner, whether your close friends, whether your mother that you don't get on with, or whatever it might be, are a towards or away from sort of person. Because sometimes you can think that someone is motivated and is going to do something, or you can try and encourage them in totally the opposite way. So you might try and say, look at the mess in this room. Aren't you sick and tired of this mess? Why don't you do something about it? To say your child, when in fact you're the person who is an away from person, but they might be a towards person. I.e., they work towards a desired outcome, in which case you need to have your flexibility, your NLP flexibility, to recognize that and speak in the different language, go to their other meta program. To say, we can go to the cinema when this room is really tidy, because this room is going to look really great when you can put your posters up and when you can do this in it and so on, and really go for the towards meta program, i.e. give them things to look forward to. And so it's very important to know whether someone is towards or away from. Now, in slightly advanced NLP, there's something called a propulsion system, where you actually build for somebody, sometimes almost without them knowing it, both an away from and a towards, to actually almost like a monorail get them going. So you amplify an away from and you amplify a towards for that person. And then you drop them in the middle of that visualization or imagination of what they're moving away from, which is really, really terrible, and what they're moving towards, which is really, really desirable. And I've seen this done and done it myself with things like exercise and motivation, where particularly under a light trance, you can really amplify the away from and really amplify the towards. So the person is literally begging to get out of the room and get to the gym, because they know how bad that they feel without doing that and how good they're going to feel after doing that. And that's called a propulsion system. So for you, for watching this, and for our tarot readers, then what we want to do is maybe find out, ask a few questions of the clients when they come in, get to know them a bit. And in the back of our head, just think, are they an away from person or a towards? Because that helps you focus on which cards you're going to talk about most, whether it's the future cards and the desired outcome, or whether it's the past cards to really amplify the maybe the negative side of where they've been, which will automatically propel them forwards. So I hope that makes sense as a simple example of a meta program. Are you an away from person and a towards person? Now, at the time of live recording, I'm about 12 minutes in. I've not seen any comments, but I have seen some things come up that tell me people have entered the live video. So I'm assuming people are here, but I'm not seeing any comments, which is interesting, because I was going to do something slightly interactive, which I'll slightly change because I can't do it without seeing any of the comments. But we'll do that tomorrow, and we'll still carry on and do one of our other tarot games as well. So the next thing then, in our ongoing build up, and you can see that we're slowly building up our framework for a brief course in NLP as far as tarot reading goes. And the next thing I wanted to do was to look at another example of a language pattern in Milton and Meta Model. And those who've been watching the previous videos, we have had modal operators of necessity, which you should have learnt by now. I'm sure you can. And if you won't learn it, then I have to say that you must learn it. But if you can learn it, then maybe you'll have found it very useful to hear how you use these words and other people use them as well. And just sometimes changing one word can change the whole context of something. So instead of someone saying, I really should do that, you can say, and what would happen if you did? Could you do it? Could you do it now? And if you can't do it now, should you do it now? And so on. And just by changing these words, you can reframe the whole context of the motivation. Universal quantifiers, you'll have heard all of the time by now. Everyone can learn these very easily, because nobody is too slow to learn these very quickly. People always find it fascinating to learn universal quantifiers, and they never forget it. No one ever forgets universal quantifiers, and you can hear these all of the time. Everybody uses them. It's just so easy to remember that just is one of the words we also have to listen out for. Okay, so our next one for today is nominalisations. Now, again, like all of these, they're very linguistic terms or pseudo-linguistic terms, modal operators of necessity, universal quantifiers, and now we have nominalisations. But again, if you are listening to people and speaking, you'll hear these all of the time as well. And they're very pernicious, these. Nominalizations are a little thing, but they are a very important and big thing, particularly for the meta model and the Milton model as well. But for the meta model, listening to a nominalization can help you a lot in unpicking other people's curses, and also the way they try and put that curse on you as well. A nominalization is basically when you turn a process or a complex sequence of events into a single object, into a thing. And the most common one that you'll all know is the relationship. Okay? The relationship. People use that as a sentence. Now, in language patterns, we want to make sure our surface representation in language, the thing we are talking about, matches the deep meaning and actuality of what we're talking about. So there's a congruence between the two, because that gives a very authentic and powerful communication, because it's solid all the way down. When people talk about the relationship, that's a very ill-formed surface to deep thing. A relationship is sometimes years and years of complex interactions, massively complex interactions, history, emotions, feelings, thoughts, memories, good and bad places, state-specific things, all sorts of things. So when someone says she just doesn't understand the relationship, or I'm having problems with the relationship, or the relationship just seems to have come to a halt, or the relationship's really picking up, or whenever they use the relationship, it's okay most of the time because we know what they're talking about. We make the mapping from the surface to the deep layer. We understand unconsciously that we don't understand what they mean by the relationship, but we sort of feel we do. And so it allows us to talk to each other without going mad, or without spending 15 hours trying to explain all of the nuances of the complex issues within how I'm going to define the word relationship in the context of the sentence I'm next about to say. We'd all go mad if we had to do that. The only time we really need to question it, not the only time, but the time we often need to question it in our line of work, is when we are wanting to find out something between the surface and the deep layer that's gone wrong, or that doesn't quite hang together. And so when, for a tarot card reader, we hear the relationship, sometimes it's okay to keep it as a nominalization. If someone says, I want a reading about my relationship, i.e. the relationship, which they now own because it's my relationship, and they say, I'm just confused about my relationship, then the relationship is a thing. And we can do a spread for the relationship. And we can, if you go back several videos, you'll find the video of turning a metaphor into a spread with clean language. And you can do that when someone says the relationship. Because then you have an object that is inside or outside, it has a shape, it has a pattern, and it will be like something else. So if someone eventually goes through that line of questions and you get from the relationship to, a football match, or an octopus, then you can do a football match or octopus spread and keep it as the relationship. And that can be a useful shorthand. Sometimes you might want to say, well, you talk about the relationship. Can you tell me some of the things in your relationship over time that have changed that you want me to look at the cards with? So you can actually turn it back into a verb, back into a process, and then read for the process rather than the thing. Another thing that I used to have a lot in my IT career was when people would talk about the project. You know, we have to do this because of the project. We have to do this because of the management. We shouldn't do this because otherwise the project will suffer. Now, the project was often a complex multi-million pound series of events and people and ambitions and aims and goals and targets and all sorts of things. It wasn't just the project. So sometimes using NLP, if you hear things like that, you can just, particularly if you're going to be on the receiving end of something that you might not want to be, then you can say, when you say the project, do you mean you? Or do you mean the management? And when we talk about the management, is that the whole management team? Or is it just some of them? Can we just look at this a little bit more in a bit more detail? And then you can break down the project and don't let them get away with that nominalization because it's very dangerous. And we use these all of the time. It's the easiest thing to do with the language that we use, but we have to listen for it sometimes and perhaps break it down or turn it back into a process, sort of denominalize it. Makes sense? And hopefully in tarot card readings, you'll now hear when your clients use nominalizations as well as all of these other things. And this is the true power in NLP. Applied to tarot card reading, that it really powerfully lets us listen to our clients, even in the briefest amount of time, and pick up lots of nuances that we can then feed back straight through the reading without blinking, without pausing. We can just feed it back through the cards and utilize it and incorporate it and utilize it back to the client. In our own language without having to sound as if we're speaking oddly or anything. We can just use it in everyday language. We can just use it. Okay, now I just wanted to give a quick example of nominalizations on the other side. So when it's the meta model, we're talking about listening for it and sometimes unpicking it because it's quite often a curse. In this case, quite often a curse that's going to be applied to us, like you don't get the relationship, you're not taking the relationship seriously. It's someone almost trying to curse us with their nominalization. And it may be that you don't understand or are behaving in particular ways that don't suit some of the aspects of a complex relationship, but that can't be turned into you're not taking the relationship seriously because the relationship doesn't exist. It's a nominalization of a complex process. Again, you have to be careful, obviously, the context and the responses that you give when you're questioning this, because otherwise it just turns you into a bit of a jerk and, no one likes everything to be questioned in some sort of clinical fashion on grammar, because the immediate answer will be, you know what I mean, and yes, we do, but it is worth sort of breaking it down a little bit further sometimes. Now, on the other side of this, the Milton model, we're now going to use the same process, but on the other side in order to weave a spell with somebody. And the examples I've given are just here. For example, anxiety is a process, but people talk about the anxiety that I feel. Relaxation is also a process, but we can utilize this in hypnosis and hypnotherapy. And time is an interesting one that I wanted to reintroduce from our overall model of time and space being very important. So, for example, time is a nominalisation. We talk about the time passing quickly, or the anxiety that we feel. All of these are not actually the thing. They may feel like it. We may represent it from the surface to the deep, but actually they're a lot more complex. And so if I was using a hypnotherapy sort of script with time, for example, I would actually nominalize it in order to help the client relax. So I'd also do the same with the anxiety. I would bend the rules backwards in order to utilize it. Now, if they're an NLP person, they're going to say, when you talk about the time, then don't you mean that that's a complex thing? And they're going to try and undo it with the meta model. But luckily enough, most of our clients aren't necessarily going to be NLP trained. So, say for example, the time, I might say in a hypnotherapeutic sort of trance induction, which is a sort of good way to introduce some of these language patterns. It's also why on NLP courses, hypnosis is sometimes taught just briefly, because it allows a demonstration of a lot of these patterns. And because a lot of the patterns were modeled on Milton H. Erickson, who was a gifted hypnotherapist, then it makes sense to utilize them in that context. So, for example, I might say something like, so we'll go back to our original thing with, if you recall, a simple way of trance induction is truism suggestion. So utilizing that and maybe some linking words and a few of the other things we've covered, I might say, as you sit in that chair and as you notice your breathing now and begin to find the relaxation that is within you. So if you listen to that again, you'll see what I've done. Truism, suggestion with a nominalisation. And this is really what Bandler and Grinder did, is they modelled the exact language that Erickson and Virginia Satir were using in order to then come up with a formula for it to teach other people. And now we're sort of teaching it the other way around. So you learn the formula first and then put the language into it. So as you sit there in the chair, noticing your breathing now and wondering where the deepest relaxation can be found inside. Everybody, as a universal quantifier, everybody knows that sometimes relaxation comes when you least expect it. Because it's possible to wonder where the time goes. Because sometimes when we're wondering most about our relationship, then we can find the time to deeply appreciate how, when we're most relaxed, more things come to people. All sorts of things come to mind, all of the positive futures that you know the time exists to be present in now. And as those memories of the future come, you can spend time wondering if a minute is passing, or perhaps an hour will pass. It will in time, because the time is there now for you to know all of those things that are possible to think of when the relationship is one of the things that you are most valuing now, as you begin to wonder when it's time to close your eyes and wonder. it's possible to feel the relaxation now, wherever you feel it the most, spreading through your body, because the most relaxation that you can find is when you find the time now to know that that is the most important thing, if you think it is, because most people, and so on. And basically, I'm just utilizing a simple set of language patterns to demonstrate them. But, we have linking words, we have universal quantifiers, I was using modal operators, a few, and truism, suggestion, and nominalization in particular, just to demonstrate that. But you can see, even in a tarot card reading, if we take a look at a card, that we could just easily put that in to say, just pick that random, King of Cups, so King of Cups. So I might say, and the King of Cups, we can see in this card, the emotions really run deep. The emotions really run deep. And that's all we need to do to normalize it. And you may find yourself noticing that you use nominalizations already all of the time. And this is just a slightly more strategic way of utilizing them. So I might say, just imagine the confidence he feels. And I wonder how he shows that the most, how he shows the confidence in himself the most. Because confidence is a process, confidence is a behavior reported by other people. It's not something that you have somewhere inside. The best way to improve someone's confidence is to amplify their curiosity and then send them into a party or something like that, loaded with stacks of propulsion to be curious and interested, with no context for that. And of course, they'll meet people, they'll ask questions, they'll show interest and everything else because their curiosity has been amplified. And then when you ask people afterwards, what was that person like? How would you describe them? Some of them will say, he was very attentive, he was very confident, he was very social. But actually, none of those things were true. He was just very curious. And I found with people who have come to me for confidence building, then to amplify their curiosity is one of the best ways to get them to behave in the way that they actually would like to behave, without trying to find the confidence that is inside them, because the confidence doesn't really exist as a thing. It's a process. So I managed to do okay. I think so far I've gone 32 minutes with no comments whatsoever. So I hope that they're being logged somewhere on Facebook, and I'll find them all afterwards and realise that I wasn't explaining myself very well, or maybe I was, who knows. So I just wanted to wave this book at the screen. People have asked about Kabbalah and Tarot, but for Kabbalah, this book isn't mentioned often. It's by Janet Beran Perkins, I think that's her name. Yes, Janet Berenson Perkins. It can be got secondhand. There is another book called Kabbalah Decoded, which is a totally different book, and I wouldn't recommend that one as a first reader. But Kabbalah Decoded, this book, is really great for beginners in Kabbalah because it is a very coffee table sort of book with lots of pretty pictures in and everything else. But it's really good at bridging both traditional Kabbalah, Judaic Kabbalah, and Western esotericism. It really does manage to get that halfway point. It doesn't sell itself short. It's a very accessible book, and it's a very easy to read book as well. and it's never mentioned. I hardly ever see this mentioned, but I mention it a lot for beginners. Kabbalah Decoder by Janet Berenson Perkins. And I think it's out of print, but quite often it comes up secondhand because hardly anyone recommends it. Okay? So I just wanted to mention that book today. Right, just a quick tarot game. It's a bit of homework for you to look up. And we'll play this when the comment section is working again. Is Haiku. For those who are familiar with my book, Tarosophy, here's the book. It's one of the exercises in here that I highly recommend. And it basically summarizes, you need to try and summarize a card by making a poem, a haiku. If you Google it, you'll find examples of haiku in English. 5 syllables, 7 syllables, and 5 syllables. So they're basically sound bits, syllable, if you're not familiar with syllables. So, for example, this is a syllable, has 6 syllables. My name is Marcus, is 5 syllables. So I could start a haiku with my name is Marcus. Is that right? My name is Marcus. Yeah, okay, 5 syllables. Someone once joked that I introduced haiku into my tarot classes just so I could watch grown adults counting on their fingers, which is quite funny because it's the best way to do it. So you get a tarot card. So let's take our King of Cups again. Oh, I can't stick him under there. Yes, okay. There we go. So a haiku for the King of Cups might be sat on his throne. Okay, that's only 4 syllables. Sat on water's throne. Sat on water's throne. Okay, so sat on water's throne. That gets me 5 syllables. So sat on water's throne. Yeah, that's 5 syllables. And this is in English. Obviously, Japanese poems, when they're transliterated into English, may not have 5, 7, 5, but they do in the original Japanese. A famous poet is Basho for haiku. So I now need 7. Now, usually the first line introduces the scene or tells us something quite literal. The second line extends it, and for those who follow that 4-world model that I use of pardes, you'll see that this is an equivalent as well. We start with the literal, we then extend the symbolism, and then we have the secret, the twist, that gives us a whole new insight as the last line. So we have P, R, D, and S, those levels, the 4 worlds. So this is Asiya, Yetzirah and Bria, and then Atzileth at the end. Okay, so we can condense a massive, complex, Kabbalistic 4 worlds interpretation of card into 17 syllables. Okay, so sat on water's throne. Now, what else do we want? We've got the waves. I quite like the foot in the water here. So 1 toe dipped in. I don't want to repeat the water because I've already used that word, and it's a waste of a couple of syllables to repeat a word in a haiku, so we don't want to do that. So if we talk about the waves, and if you're screaming at or typing in at the moment with an obvious line for me, I'm sorry, I can't see it, so I do apologize. I share your frustration. So sat on water's throne, king so regal dips his toe. Okay, I'll go with that for the moment. So king so regal dips his toe. King so regal dips his toe. There we go. So that's 7. I've got a whole 7 syllables to play with. But now I've got to condense it down to 5 and give some summary or twist to the end. So King so regal dips his toe. And I quite like the idea of the crown and the toe as being separate things, because I mentioned the king. So I wonder if I can say something about his crown. But we need to say something about the King of Cups himself. And I always feel that he's quite separate from things, because even though he dips his toe, he's still got his armour on. Okay, so still got his armour on. His armour still on. Okay, that will do. So, and that gives a slight twist to the whole thing. His armour still on. Okay, so sat on water's throne, King so regal dips his toe, his armour still on. Okay, and that's a brief haiku for our King of Cups. And what I'd like you to do for our next session is provide your own. Have a go at it yourself, look at haiku. If you can put in an NLP language pattern, then you'll get bonus points, lots of bonus points. Okay, so there's some haiku for you as well. We've done meta programs, another example of Milton model and meta model, and we've done a haiku as well. So we're really motoring this bank holiday Sunday, Easter Sunday. So we're going to finish with our bedtime reading, Calvino, Invisible Cities, and this is slightly more subtle city of Irene. Irene is the city visible when you lean out from the edge of the plateau at the hour when the lights come on, and in the limpid air, the pink of the settlement can be discerned spread out in the distance below. Where the windows are more concentrated, where it thins out dimly in lighted alleys, where it collects the shadows of gardens, where it raises towers with signal fires, and if the evening is misty, a hazy glow swells like a milky sponge at the foot of the gullies. Travellers on the plateau, shepherds shifting their flocks, birdcatchers watching their nets, hermits gathering greens, all look down and speak of Irene. At times the wind brings a music of bass drums and trumpets, the bang of firecrackers in the light display of a festival. At times the rattle of guns, the explosion of a powder magazine in the sky yellow with the fires of civil war. Those who look down from the heights conjecture about what is happening in the city. They wonder if it would be pleasant or unpleasant to be in Irene that evening. Not that they have any intention of going there. In any case, the roads winding down to the valley are bad. But Irene is a magnet for the eyes and thoughts of those who stay up above. At this point, Kubla Khan expects Marco to speak of Irene as it is seen from within. If we recall, Kubla Khan is being told these stories of the invisible cities by the traveller Marco Polo in the story. But Marco cannot do this. He has not succeeded in discovering which is the city that those of the plateau call Irene. For that matter, it is of slight importance. If you saw it standing in its midst, it would be a different city. Irene is a name for a city in the distance, and if you approach, it changes. For those who pass it without entering, the city is one thing. It is another for those who are trapped by it and never leave. There is the city where you arrive for the first time, and there is another city which you leave never to return. Each deserves a different name. Perhaps I have already spoken of Irene under other names. Perhaps in all these cities I have spoken only of Irene. Slightly more subtle city, perhaps, for our Easter Sunday. Again, thank you very much for bearing with me as I conducted this ritual. without any commentary being visible to me whatsoever. I do hope you've been kind to me, and I wish you a very happy Easter Sunday. And again, stay safe, stay sane. If you're watching this as a recording in the next few days, then hello to you and thank you for watching this. And tomorrow we're going to carry on with a few more language patterns, a bit more from Tarosophy, with dealing with tarot cards. And we're going to continue on with that for the next few days. I look forward to sharing some more information and tarot methods with you, particularly from Tarosophy, which I'll be heading into over the next few days. Okay, thanks a lot for your time and attention. Take care of yourselves and each other, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye for now.